In Japan, there are really weird, counterintuitive customs and rites in regional places that overwhelm us. Most of them were prohibited from inheriting with the times. In this video, I want to introduce 10 weird Japanese customs that used to be actually practiced in the past, seen as taboo in modern times. Yobai literally means night crawling. This is one of the ancient Japanese marriage systems that husband and wife live apart, and husband visits wife on a regular basis even after getting married to each other. A word of Yobai with kanji handed down in modern days is reminiscent of the situation where a man sneaks into a room of a woman to forcibly have a relationship. But originally, Yobao, which is the original state of Yobai, means calling husband to her house. Ancient Japan was a matrilineal society that women were in a stronger position in many cases. A man was in the position to ask a woman and her family for permission to marry. If he got permitted by a woman to marry her, he established marriage ties with the woman in the form of being adopted by wife's family. Even after getting married to each other, they lived apart, and a man always needed to be permitted to meet his wife. So a man takes trouble to visit his wife all the way from where he lives every time a wife calls him. This is Yobai. As time goes by, this word came to indicate the situation where a man sneaks into an unmarried woman's house while she sleeps and he forcibly have a relationship, with the background that ancient traditional custom was interpreted wrongly and people confused it with other regional unique customs. This marriage style was inherited in regional villages around Japan until the beginning of the 20th century when the government prohibited this custom by a law. This is a very unique family system that used to exist in a certain region in Nagano Prefecture. This family system had been inherited since the 16th century. Under this family system, only the eldest brother can organize his social life, but younger brother called Ojiroku and a younger sister called Obasa are segregated from a village society, and they spend their whole life as a slave to do housework. Children younger than the eldest in the middle-class household or higher were treated like this. They were not permitted to get married to and date with anyone, and also go to a village festival. They make a bow if someone greets them, but basically they don't really like to communicate with anyone, and they're always in a lethargy. It is not that they are abused domestically in a house, but their position in the house is just like a slave for a labor of housework. It is said that villagers used to control the number of people in a village by means of this family system. They had no trouble eating in their lifetime, but they needed to devote their whole life to the house where they were born under this family system. Higishou is classified as trial by ordeal. This custom was done in Japan from the Middle Ages to the early modern period, which is from Sengoku period and the beginning of the Edo period. In this trial, justice let a person concerned put a red-hot iron stick on the palm of their hands and take it to an altar by walk and put it on the top of an altar in order to judge if what they say is worth believing. This type of trial used to be held when claims of both parties held the field that didn't make things come to conclusion during discussion in order to ask for judgment by a god. Each representative selected from two groups with conflict of opinions reaches out hands with gold hoin, a copied paper charm open on its palm, an extreme hot iron stick was put on it. They were made to take it to an altar in front of officials, and the credibility of their opinions was measured with how perfectly they took an extreme hot iron stick to an altar with their hands. If they failed, a group where they belonged was regarded as being defeated, and the representative of a group was beheaded as punishment that they deceived a god. In an extreme case, they were hanged, drawn, and quartered. The representative who belonged to a group of a victory in this trial was seriously injured and affected by a serious disease because of burn. For that reason, there were casualties and victims in this trial no matter whether they won or lost. Kuburabari is the name of the real place located in the Yonaguni Island that belongs to Okinawa Prefecture in Japan. There was a frightful custom around here that caused many islanders to die. When the kingdom of Ryukyu prospered in the 14th century, trade with China and other Asian countries flourished. Accordingly, Ryukyu people started invading remote islands scattered around the mainland of Ryukyu. The Ryukyu royal government had started exploiting inhabitants of islands around the mainland of Ryukyu since then. In 1609, Satsuma domain under the control of Tokugawa shogunate invaded the Shuri castle. They put political pressure on the Ryukyu royal government. In the wake of this incident, the royal Ryukyu government imposed heavy taxation to administrative islands. It is called nintozi that forced people to pay tax in the name of life tax. People were made to pay tax regardless of individual income level, age, and gender when they reached a certain age. Islanders unable to bear payment of heavy tax under poor living conditions attempted murder to reduce the number of islanders in order to deal with heavy taxation. Kuburabari is a place where many islanders were murdered. There were so many big rocks around here, and there was a cleft in between rocks which was as big as an adult could easily go inside. Pregnant woman was brought here, and they were forced to jump from one rock to the other through cleft, which was as wide as an adult couldn't reach their feet, even with legs widely open. Some pregnant women fell down cleft and were dead. Other pregnant women could survive, but were seriously injured and had a miscarriage. In addition, there was a test called Tsunguda. This test was imposed to male islanders to make sure if they were worth working to bring money in this island. Suddenly a gong is rung, or a horn is blown, and those sounds echo around the island. Men need to rush to a field called Tsunguda within a limited time. If they can't reach a field, they are killed, being regarded as useless labor force. On top of that, children, handicapped people, sick people, injured people, old people, and people regarded as dependents who just put burden on household budget were all murdered. Ushinokokumairi is one of the outstanding Japanese curse ceremonies that descended from ancient times. In this ceremony, a person with deep resentment sends a curse on someone by hammering nails into a straw doll that was made to look like a hated person to Goshinboku, a sacred tree enshrined in a shrine at from 1 to 3 o'clock in the midnight. Typically, this curse ceremony is descended with a picture that a woman with white kimono and a metal poop attached with some lighted candles on her head, who is tormented by strong grudge coming from deep jealousy, is hammering nails into a straw doll to a sacred tree. A cursor visits shrine to do this curse ceremony for 7 consecutive days. On the 7th day, a cursed person will die, but it is believed that if a cursor is accidentally witnessed by someone while they do the ceremony, the curse effect is completely lost. The origin of this custom is said to be from Kifune Shrine in Kyoto. Ningyoukon literally means doll marriage, which can be classified as posthumous marriage that exists around the world. This doll marriage is a posthumous custom inherited in Aomori Prefecture that lets young people and little kids that are unmarried get married to a doll. A doll that becomes their spouse is not modeled after a real man, but is a fictitious character with a fictitious name. There is the feeling of compassion from bereaved family that they want to let deceased get married to someone even with just a formality. But at the same time, it is also thought that a person dead and married is a vengeful spirit causing curse because this spirit has not completed their life normally, so people think a posthumous custom is needed to calm the spirit. Actually, this posthumous custom had started in around 1950s, and this custom took root in a certain region in Aomori as a traditional posthumous custom in 1980s. Surprisingly, this custom is relatively new in Japan. Hitobashira is a human sacrifice rite. This is a ritual custom that buries selected people alive under the ground or sink them alive into water for the purpose of praying to God for large-scale buildings such as a bridge, an embankment, a castle, and herbal facilities not to be collapsed because of natural disasters, man-made disasters, and enemy raid. Apart from whether this custom was practiced as history told, there are so many castles with legends around Japan that people as sacrifice were buried alive under the ground in the process of building. In 1925, a newspaper reported that 16 human bones were found from the ground of the Imperial Palace. The Imperial Palace, where the Emperor of Japan lives, used to be the Edo Castle governed by Tokugawa shogunate. These bones were thought to belong to people becoming sacrificed for castle building. Sokushinbutu is a mummified monk that can be seen in Buddhism in Japan. It is believed in a folk belief existing in a certain region in Japan that a monk is not dead, but they get into everlasting meditation for the purpose of salvation of all life in this world until becoming Maitreya after crossing the border of life and death. After a monk falls into deep meditation after crossing the border of life and death through penance, such as extreme fasting or being buried alive under the ground, monk's body becomes Buddha itself, which is called Sokushinbutu. A monk who aims to become Sokushinbutu firstly stops eating grains like rice and wheat and start eating nuts, fruits, berries, and grass growing everywhere as preparation for fasting to organize their body not to be decayed and to get their body close to mummy. They spend a whole day by reading the scripture and getting into deep meditation. This custom was mainly inherited in Shonai region in Yamagata prefecture. In Edo period, so many monks were buried under the ground and fell into deep meditation to become Sokushinbutu, for salvation of people suffering from starvation and epidemic. But after Meiji period, this ritual behavior was prohibited by a law. It is said that there are still so many mummified monks left under the ground with no excavation because it took a long time until a monk became a perfect mummy. By the way, it is easily confused with Sokushinjobs. Both are totally different. Sokushinbutu tends to have materialistic aspect in its ritual behavior like a dead monk becomes Buddha as mummified body materially. In contrast, Sokushinjobs is to attain Buddhahood during lifetime through practicing doctrine of esoteric Buddhism, which means that an alive monk becomes Buddha by connecting with Dainichi Nyorai while they exist in this world through ascetic training. Buddha and us are consist of the same composition elements, and both Buddha and all life can be integrated because we are originally in existence to attain Buddhahood. This is the concept of Sokushinjobs. Murahachibu is a Japanese original private sanction measure or private punishment to those who violate the rule of a community. This can be in the category of lynching. Murahachibu literally means village 80%. This percentage is the numerical indicator that shows the degree of intimacy. Assuming that maximum intimacy is 100%, Murahachibu is village people's intention that they refuse 80% intimacy except for 20% intimacy, which is as close as they only ask for cooperation of firefighting and attend a funeral. This is the origin of this word. Murahachibu is a regional private sanction with indifference and expulsion that quarantines a person who breaks the rule from a community. Regions unite and consistently stick to their attitude of indifference to a person who violates the rule of a community with an intention of refusal to have a relationship with him or her. To put it in another way, it is more like shunning, which is the act of social rejection. Troublingly, the rules regulated in small villages in countryside of Japan are implicit ones that are not clearly stipulated in many cases. And the problem is that some of the implicit rules they uniquely make is contrary to general common sense and the laws. This rule sometimes forces people to maintain childish camaraderie that defends someone who commits fraud to something regulated by the common law. There was an incident in the countryside of Shizuoka Prefecture in the past that a woman who made an accusation for election rigging was persistently harassed with shunning by villagers for the reason that she sold out companion. There are many cases that immigrants from an urban city who are not really clear about the rule of a village violate the rule before they know it, and they are subject to sanction and receive shunning harassment from villagers. Honekami literally means biting bone. This is a Japanese funeral custom that close blood relatives eat remains of the dead after funeral ceremony and cremation. The behavior of eating remains of the dead has been inherited in some regions in Ehime, Hyogo, Aichi, and Niigata until recent years. This behavior comes from the feeling of mourning and love toward the dead, but some of them took powdered remains with the thought that they wanted to take advantage of vitality and ability of the dead. I think there are still so many weird rites in the custom that makes us tilt our head to the side in Japan that doesn't totally make sense with our sense of value and common laws. Closed environments of villages and original towns exclusive to the outside world generates weird customs, including a very unique animism religion that has descended in the place from ancestors since a long time ago. If you want to live in a remote village far away from an urban city in Japan, you should be prepared to accept everything happening in front of you.